Have you ever been in a situation where you spoke with all the logic in the world, but somehow people still dismissed you? I used to believe that to be respected, you had to fight for every word, to defend your point like a soldier on a battlefield. But one day, in the middle of a heated meeting, I realized something that changed the way I communicate forever. I raised my voice. People went silent, but not because they respected me. They were simply waiting for me to stop. That day I learned that real power doesn't come from shouting. It comes from presence, from calmness, from words so deliberate that they can't be ignored. The truth is, you don't need to raise your voice to command respect. You need to raise your clarity. And once you learn how to do that, people start treating you differently. At work, at home, and even in the smallest interactions. So today, I'm going to share 5 phrases that, when said at the right moment, make people listen. Phrases that express calm strength, the kind of strength that can silence a room without saying much at all. Stay until the end, because phrase number 3 changed the way I deal with conflict forever. Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you respond to it that matters." The Stoics understood that self-control was the highest form of power. They believed that when you control your words, you control the entire situation. And that's exactly what we're going to learn to do. Throughout my life, I've failed many times at this. I've lost my temper, spoken too soon, and regretted my words. But over time, I began to see a pattern. Every time I spoke from emotion, I lost respect. Every time I spoke from reason, I gained it. The difference between those 2 moments was just a few seconds, the pause before I spoke. And in that pause lies the essence of Stoic wisdom. Let's begin with the first phrase. Phrase 1. I understand your point, but I disagree. I remember the first time I used this phrase. I was working with someone who loved to dominate every discussion. In the past, I would have argued, defended myself, and left the conversation exhausted. But that day, something in me shifted. I listened quietly, took a breath, and said, "I understand your point, but I disagree." The room went quiet. Not because I'd proven anything, but because I'd shown control. This phrase tells the other person, I'm listening, I'm calm, but I won't be moved by pressure. In Stoic philosophy, this is known as separating judgment from emotion. You don't react, you respond. You don't try to win, you stand your ground. You don't need to justify yourself endlessly. By simply acknowledging the other person's point, you remove their need to keep convincing you, and by calmly stating your disagreement, you affirm your independence. It's a phrase that sounds gentle but feels unshakable. The first time you use it, you'll sense a shift. People will pause and start weighing their words around you. Phrase 2. I don't find that appropriate. This one came to me after a personal failure. I once stayed silent when someone made an offensive comment toward a colleague. I didn't want to cause trouble, but silence, I realized, often sounds like agreement. Later, when I reflected on it, I felt ashamed, not of what they said, but of what I didn't say. From that day on, I made a promise to myself. I would always protect my dignity and the dignity of others, but with serenity. So, the next time I found myself in a similar situation, I calmly said, I don't find that appropriate. Nothing more, no lecture, no anger, just calm conviction. And that was enough. The person immediately stepped back. Seneca once said, he who respects himself will be respected by others. That's exactly what this phrase does. It draws an invisible line. You don't need to explain why you're uncomfortable. You simply state your standard. When spoken firmly, this phrase makes people reconsider their tone, their jokes, even their attitude, because they sense they've crossed a line with someone who knows their own worth. Phrase 3. Let's talk when we can do so respectfully. This phrase changed my life. Years ago, I was in an argument with someone close to me. Emotions were high, words were flying, and I could feel my heart pounding. I knew that if I kept talking, I'd say something I'd regret. So I stopped, took a deep breath, and said, let's talk when we can do so respectfully. Then I walked away. It wasn't easy. My ego wanted the last word. But that moment of silence became one of the most powerful in my life. Because for the first time I realized that walking away is not weakness, it's wisdom. Epictetus taught that we can't control what others say, but we can always control how we respond. When you use this phrase, you're not running from the conflict, you're mastering it. You're setting the rules for when and how communication happens. This phrase disarms aggressiveness instantly. It shifts the focus from the argument to the behavior. And that's why it's so powerful. It shows that respect is the condition for any conversation with you. The first time I said it, the other person looked at me with surprise. Later, they came back calmer, ready to talk. That's when I understood. When you lead with respect, people eventually mirror it. Phrase 4. I'd prefer not to continue this conversation. There are times when silence is more elegant than any argument. I learned this the hard way. After spending years trying to convince people who didn't want to understand, I would repeat myself, hoping logic would do the job. But the truth is, not every discussion deserves your energy. One day, during a pointless back and forth, I simply said, I'd prefer not to continue this conversation, and I walked away. The peace I felt afterward was almost shocking, because for the first time, I realized I didn't owe anyone my emotional energy. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." This phrase embodies that wisdom. You don't need to fight every battle. You just need to choose your silence with purpose. When you say this, you're not rejecting the person, you're rejecting the chaos, and that distinction makes you powerful. It's a reminder that protecting your peace doesn't make you cold, it makes you clear. The moment you master this phrase, people start treating your time and presence with new respect, because they sense that your attention is something they have to earn. Phrase 5. That's your opinion, and I respect it, but I don't share it. The last phrase is the perfect balance of courtesy and conviction. It's the one I use most often today. There was a time when I would bend my beliefs just to keep the peace. I thought agreeing with everyone made me kind, but it only made me invisible. Then one day, during a discussion about a topic I deeply cared about, I felt that old urge to nod and avoid conflict. But instead I said, "That's your opinion, and I respect it, but I don't share it." The other person paused, and what surprised me most was what came next. They nodded in respect, because people can sense when your calm comes from confidence. Seneca said that to live according to reason is to live in freedom. This phrase is freedom in words. It allows you to remain polite while keeping your integrity intact. You acknowledge the other's view. That's empathy. But you affirm your own truth. That's strength. And that balance is what earns you genuine respect. When you use this phrase, you no longer fear disagreement. You see it for what it really is, a sign that you think independently. Now you know the 5 phrases that command respect without shouting. I understand your point, but I disagree. I don't find that appropriate. Let's talk when we can do so respectfully. I'd prefer not to continue this conversation. That's your opinion and I respect it, but I don't share it. Each of these sentences is a reflection of something deeper, self-mastery. They don't just change how people see you, they change how you see yourself. Because when you learn to speak calmly under pressure, you prove to yourself that you are no longer ruled by impulse, but by wisdom. In a world that rewards noise, being calm is revolutionary. True respect is not demanded, it's inspired. And it starts with how you speak, with how you choose your words, tone, and silence. The next time someone tries to provoke you, remember this: a storm can't touch the mountain. You don't need to shout to be strong. You just need to stand firm, steady, and clear. At Stoic Spring, I teach you how to speak, think, and act with the wisdom of the great philosophers, so you can live with more respect, more peace, and unshakable inner strength. Subscribe now and start your journey toward calm authority. And tell me in the comments, which of these 5 phrases are you going to use first? I'll be reading every answer,